How much does it cost to start a home staging business? It's a very common question. It's one that we hear all the time and see all the time. Today we're going to tackle a range of questions around that one topic on this week's Foxy TV. It's hire what you need to and buy what you can. As a startup, that's the way to go. I think your dollars are better spent elsewhere. Pricing strategy, how to make sure that you're covering costs and making sure that, or you're ensuring that you're a profitable business. It's so important to understand, are you making money on each job? What are you making? What are the costs? You have to understand that. To start with, you have a buffer. You need to have a bit of a buffer so that if there is that slowdown, you have the money there to cover those fixed costs. Maybe we've got a little bit of a different opinion here compared to a lot of other people in the industry. Invest as much as you possibly can from your profit back into the business. Get help, hire help sooner than you think you need it. Bring somebody in earlier than you need them, because then they can help take on some of that workload so you can focus on growing the business. So some of the types of questions that we're going to cover today are, what are the initial things that you need to think about? So inventory, supplies, what do you need to get? What do they cost? Some of the other questions are things around insurance, how to finance these sorts of things, how to think about finance from a sustainability point of view going forward, and making sure that you're investing in growth at the same time as making sure that you're not overdoing it and putting yourself at risk. Marketing, all sorts of those sorts of costs and how much, so putting dollar figures to some of them, and yeah, what else are we thinking about? So all of those questions we're going to cover. I will start as well by putting a small caveat, and this is probably one that everyone would have expected, and that is that the answer to most of these is, in some form, it depends. How long's a piece of string? I'm going to do what I can to give you some specifics and talk about what it cost us in a number of these things and how I would think about it, but at the end of the day, where you're based, what type of business model you have, how you're going about growth, which I will go into a bit of detail. All of those things impact the cost that you will have to cover starting a home staging business. So the first one, what are the initial investments required from an inventory and supplies point of view? Now this is pretty broad. When we talk about inventory, we can talk about the furniture, the artwork, accessories, basically anything that you might take into a property. I would class that as inventory. Supplies, generally, if I'm separating that, I'm talking about the things that you need that are maybe what we would call consumables, so light bulbs, screws, the tools that you would use, all the things that help you get the job done. How much, or what is the actual cost of these? This is one of those big it depends questions. I think the first thing to think about in terms of this question is, what is your business model going to look like? Whether you are hiring furniture, hiring some of the bits and pieces that are going to a property, or whether you're going to buy up front, whether that's even an option for you, depending on whether you're regional or in a capital or a major city. If you are looking to buy everything and you want to own it, you want to have a warehouse full of stock, obviously there's going to be a larger capital investment. If you are, and that also goes for regional, sometimes you don't have the option, you have to buy, so the cost is going to be higher, and it's going to depend on how many houses you want to be able to stage it at one point in time. From my point of view, if it is an option for you, I believe that the best way to go about it is to buy what you can within reason, and obviously that depends on your situation, what capital you have available to you, factoring in having a buffer, having some savings there, but hire everything else. The reason that I say that is because that lets you get started. It means when you're hiring furniture, and that's one of the questions in a minute that we'll get into as well, hiring means that your profit margins are lower because you're spending more to pay somebody else for the hire of that furniture. But what it means is you can say yes to jobs. If you don't have that option available, or you don't want to go down that path and you have to own everything, it means to say yes to even one job means a very big capital outlay. So this is how we did it at the start, and I think it's probably a good balanced way to go about it, is to minimize costs and to give yourself the opportunity to grow in a way that is dependent on what you have available to you, as opposed to trying to stretch yourself to get the next house and the next house. It's hire what you need to and buy what you can, and that way you can continue to grow in that manner. I'm going to go on to the second question, even though that one wasn't fully answered, because some of these other questions help answer that one a bit more as well. So the next one I've got here is how you think about budgeting and marketing, budget for marketing and advertising at the beginning. Simple answer, it's free. At the beginning, it doesn't need to be paid for. That's my opinion on it. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of these platforms are free to use and free to get your name out there. Emails, there's a whole range of free marketing activities that you can do just to get your name out there in front of the right people. And I would recommend that as a startup, that's the way to go. I think your dollars are better spent elsewhere. As you grow and as you maybe have more capital and dollars available to you, maybe some paid advertising is something to consider. But at the beginning as a startup, I would recommend stick with what's free to start with. Insurance is another one that comes up quite often. To be honest, the cost for insurance, well, first and foremost, insurances are a necessity. There are certain insurances that you have to have from a legality point of view, but then separate to that, things that you, in this sort of business, you definitely should have anyway. So things to protect a lot of your furniture, warehousing, but also out on site, public liability. If you've got a warehouse, there's plate glass insurance, all of those sorts of things. The cost of those is actually probably less than what a lot of people would think, but my recommendation here is get in touch with an insurance broker and they can set you up with a policy that matches, obviously your location is going to impact this as well, but they can make sure you've got the right sort of insurances, and the premiums for those sorts of things as a starting point can be in the hundreds of dollars for an annual annual premium to cover a lot of those things. It will definitely go up with the size of the business, the number of people that you have employed, all those sorts of things as well. These ones are jumping around a little bit, but I'll keep going through the list in the order I've got it here. So how much should you set aside for unexpected expenses? How much is really dependent on your fixed costs. So do you have a warehouse, which as a startup cost, you can probably avoid that for a period of time? Do you have staff? Again, as a startup, maybe you have one or two, maybe you don't have any. How much you put aside for unexpected costs is going to come down to covering 1, 2, 3, 6 months worth of those fixed costs. Unexpected costs in our business, from our experience at least, it's probably less about unexpected costs and more about unexpected downturn or lower revenue, lower income. So if you're banking on having certain number of jobs to cover your costs and those jobs don't come through, then you have to cover those fixed ones. So if your fixed costs are very low, which as a startup they probably will be, the amount that you need to have as a buffer is going to be lower. Website, online presence, what are the costs with those things? Those things can be done very cheaply these days. Setting up, Phoebe did our website herself in the beginning, and we've done a little bit of a few updates since then, but to be honest, Phoebe spent the time to learn and actually build a lot of our website using some of the online tools that are available, and most of it's free. The major cost there is going to be your domain registration, annual sort of fees, and some web hosting, but they can be in the low hundreds of dollars for an annual sort of cost. Again, that's kind of one of those things that people can spend a lot of money on, but I would recommend learning in the startup how to do some of those things yourself. Pricing strategy, how to make sure that you're covering costs and making sure that, or you're ensuring that you're a profitable business. This one, to be honest, it's all about knowing your numbers. So this one again depends on your business model. If you're hiring furniture, obviously you've got that big cost. You need to make sure that your pricing is the higher cost plus a margin, and that margin is going to have to cover things like your removalists or logistics costs, any other furniture that you're wanting to build over time. So it's going to be a cost plus margin sort of model. Or you can go down the path, if you're buying everything, of a payback model where you calculate, what is it costing me to buy this furniture? I want to be able to pay it back within 3, 4, 5 uses. For us, it sits between 3 and 4 as an average. So everything that we buy as an average, we use it 3 or 4 times in different properties, and it's paid itself back. So that's how we set our pricing. Obviously market dependent as well. So what are your competitors pricing themselves at? But I think, again, starting point is what model are you using? So how are you getting your furniture? What are your costs? And then you figure it out whether it's a margin on top or a payback period. I will just say as well on that one, it's so important to know your numbers. If you don't, and a lot of people aren't business minded at the beginning, it's not something that, a lot of people will say that's not my strength. It's so important to understand, are you making money on each job? What are you making? What are the costs? You have to understand that you're signing up as a business owner. That's kind of a minimum requirement from my point of view. Getting there, so what are the legal and administrative costs for setting up a business? I would say first and foremost, get it done properly. Speak to somebody who can set it up for you. It'll cost you a little bit more, but it'll make sure that you've got the right structures in place. So if you need some sort of trust or a partnership or whatever you're going to set up your business as, and again, depending if you're in Australia or the States, if you're overseas, it's all different. So the costs themselves can be you can get quite a wide range. They can be cheap if you do it yourself. If you get it done properly, it's going to cost you more, and that's what I would recommend to make sure that you're setting yourself up right. I don't know what the dollar number is for us at the beginning. It was probably in the range of $4,000 to $5,000, and that was to set up with trusts and the business, and we also had some kind of family trust stuff going on. So it was a little bit complicated, so maybe you can do it for less, but just as an indication. Technology and software, how can we invest in that to help streamline your operations and costs for that? Simple answer is most of this is free or very small subscription costs. There are paid versions of most apps that you can use, and as your business grows, you might want to look into those. But things like Trello, that's one of the apps we use as a project management tool, that's free, and we use it still today, 7 years after we started. For marketing and some of the stuff you want to put up, Canva has a free version. Accounting software is another one. You can generally get a very minimal level of access, I guess, for free, but then there's a small payment as a kind of monthly subscription. Again, all of those things are important, so see what free options you have, and you can generally get by as a startup, and then pay for the ones that you absolutely need, like the good accounting softwares. Transport and logistics, so basically the movers. How do you get your furniture in and out of properties? This one, again, I feel like I say it depends a lot, but it really does. It depends on location, depends on what options you have available to you. General range, at least from my experience, is going to be in the $120 up to $180 an hour mark, depending on, like I said, the quality of the business, whether it's 2 people in a truck or 3, depending on whether they have to travel further. So that's one of those things, you just have to look around your market and see what's available. Obviously, as you move on, you can start thinking about bringing logistics in-house, but as a startup, you don't really have that option. So it's finding somebody who's going to look after your furniture, knows how to do a good job and look after clients' properties, and knows how to be flexible. Obviously, you don't always have control over when they're going to show up and how quickly they can get a job done. So those sorts of things factor in for me on whether I might pay a little bit more, and I think we did pay a little bit more when we started, to get the right people in to help us out. Managing cash flow is another one that comes up quite a bit. So particularly during slow periods, or periods where you have a little bit of a lull, so less revenue coming in, how do you manage cash? And there's a couple of answers, but the simple one is, to start with, you have a buffer. You need to have a bit of a buffer so that if there is that slowdown, you have the money there to cover those fixed costs. Just simply being aware of some of the periods, you won't always know, but you know what? Christmas for us December is always a quiet period for us. We know that and we prepare for that. So knowing your market is important. Obviously there's going to be some unexpected periods of downturn. That's where the buffer comes in. And then I guess another one just to consider is things like overdraft facilities, line of credit. So talk to your bank about what you can set up so that if a period like that comes where you need to draw down on some sort of overdraft facility to get you through the quiet period as a kind of backup option. I'd be careful about that using debt, but it is an option there to help you in those periods. It's probably worth considering. We're nearly there. Are there any training or certification costs that you can use to help either enhance your credibility, help you learn? I would say that those are definitely options, but as a startup, I would say maybe we've got a little bit of a different opinion here compared to a lot of other people in the industry. I don't think it's a necessity. I think it's something that if you've got that background, you've already done the study, it's a bonus and it can definitely be helpful. But if you're trying to figure out how to spend the very limited budget that you have when you're starting a business like this, I think it's better spent elsewhere, and it's something that you can add to over time if you need to. Or to be completely honest, there's a lot of free resources, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of actual training courses and groups and Facebook groups, those sorts of things that can help you get started. And the reality is, even though there are courses out there that can help you, we started this business 7 years ago with none of that, and we've been quite successful in building a reputation, building a lot of agents that work with us regularly, and we don't have any of those certifications. So I'm sure there'll be some that disagree with me, but I would say, again, think about the best use of your dollars as a startup, and it's probably not in that area for me. I touched on this one, but the cost of renting versus buying, to put dollars to it is pretty difficult, but it's just a trade-off where you need to go and talk to somebody, the third-party provider that you can hire furniture from. You just need to go and get a list. They'll have their list, they can tell you what it's going to cost you, and then you need to compare that to what it would cost to buy that furniture, and you can kind of do that comparison, do an analysis of whether you have the capital, do you have the funds there to buy it? If you don't, knowing what that comparison is it a 3 or 4 or 5 times payback between the two. So it's just something you'll need to go and do some research. What else have we got? I think this is about the last one. What financial strategies can you employ to help grow your staging business in a sustainable way? So I did touch on this, but my recommendation in this case is hire and buy furniture. If that is an option to you. Buying upfront with a large capital outlay, you go out and you need to buy an entire house worth of furniture, accessories, all the things, that's a large outlay. And even then you go and put it in a house, then what? Where's the next house worth of stuff coming from? Are you going to go and get the next job in 8 weeks when the furniture comes back, or are you going to keep going? So how much capital do you have to invest? How many houses are you going to need to buy up front? My opinion is if you have capital available, you spend some of it to buy what you can, but you hire the rest, because then you can keep saying yes to work. You can keep building those relationships. You can keep getting the income in the door. Even if your profit margins are lower at the start, it just lets you build up in a sustainable way. As a final point on that, I would also say this isn't easy for everybody, but invest as much as you possibly can from your profit back into the business. If you can afford not to take any wage for a period of time, if you can rely on savings, if you have a second income in your family, and again, I understand not everybody has access to this, but if you do, I think the more you can invest into a business like this in the beginning stages, the faster that snowball effect starts to come in, and yeah, just really being able to let your business grow on its own profits in the early periods, the early months, the early years, really helps you set yourself up in the future. Another thing in terms of financial strategies, which might seem very counterintuitive and might not maybe fit the financial question that I'm answering right now, but it is get help, hire help sooner than you think you need it. It's one of those things that a lot of people in this industry start out by themselves and they put it off because they're waiting for some perfect number to say, when I make this much, when I get this many houses, when I get this much work, that's when I need somebody. And I would say that holding off, waiting for those numbers is going to slow you down. It's going to take you longer to get to those numbers. Bring somebody in earlier than you need them, because then they can help take on some of that workload so you can focus on growing the business. So it is from a financial point of view, obviously it's another fixed cost. It's a risk in one sense, but what it does is it allows you to grow. It frees up your time as the business owner, and it helps you get to that sustainable point. That's a lot of rambling. That's a lot of answers. I didn't talk a lot of dollars, but I hope it's answered the question in a way that lets you think about what's important to you. Your business model is such a big determining factor in a lot of these questions, and I think it's important to get set on that right, or at least understand what you're looking for right at the beginning. And then a lot of these other costs, like I said, it's about understanding what's the priority. Your dollars are limited, your capital is limited. Where am I going to get the best bang for buck? What's the most important? And you take it from there.